So the last couple of weeks, we've been working through John chapter 6, verses 24 through 35. I would encourage you to go back and watch this series up until this point. Essentially, I'll just kind of do a little bit of review, but essentially what we gathered from that is Jesus says, listen, you come and you believe, and you also remember that the term believe there has a little different aspect than what we think of when we talk about faith, or when we generally talk about the term belief, and that is the idea of entrusting. And Jesus essentially says, you come, you believe, I fulfill, I satisfy, I make whole. And this makes sense. But how are we supposed to understand this? Well, when we point this back to Genesis chapter 1 and chapter 2, God created us as spiritual beings. And therefore we have deeper spiritual needs that only God himself can fulfill. Now, at some point, we must, and I believe we all do, whether we recognize it or not, realize that the things that we pursue after, the things that we try to attain, achieve, ultimately do not satisfy. And that makes sense because those things, well, only God can satisfy, and those things aren't made to satisfy us. Because we are created to be in a relationship with God, where we can experience this true peace. Remember, Jesus came to guide our feet into the way of peace. So we are created to be in this relationship with God where we experience, remember, this relationship with God is experiential. It goes beyond just the philosophical and the peripheral. It has to be experiential. It's a real thing. It goes beyond just something that you think you understand in depths of. It goes beyond just parsing language and sentences. It's experiential. It's something we live out. It's the reality in which we live. And so that reality brings about for us, this true peace that only comes from God. And that missing piece inside all of us is a direct result of this disconnect, this separation from God that we hear of in the beginning of the book of Genesis. And we are aware of this. And what we need to be aware of is that the greatest spiritual need that any of us have is to be reconnected with our Creator in a way that goes way beyond just philosophical thinking. Because just knowing about all of this intellectually is not enough. If it was, we wouldn't be where we are in so many ways. Just knowing all of this intellectually is not enough. We actually have to act upon it by entrusting ourselves, as Jesus says, in him who he, that is God, has sent. John chapter 6 and verse 29. Which is not just some philosophical idea. It's not just this peripheral thing that we have going on over here. God is that which fills the void, and only God can fill it. He is the very source of our lives, the very source of our existence. For in him we live and move and have our very being or existence. Now that either means something or it doesn't. It's either just a nice religious passage to refer to, or it's a reality in which we live. Now, Jesus says all we have to do is entrust our lives, our very existence, into his hands. But through the course of our own journeys, no doubt, we come to these places where we realize that there are certain aspects of who we are that are not in line with who God is. And it will indeed be the case that the deeper you go into a relationship with God, the more apparent these things will become. You will see them. They will be there staring you right in the face. And as we said last week, when we recognize them, well, that's when we give them the attention that we need to give them. That is what we're going to deal with in that season of our lives. Instead of us busying ourselves trying to force and make things become reality or happen to us. If you were in class this morning, you heard a very good discussion about that. And hopefully you'll hear more and more as we proceed on. Now, regardless of what those aspects are that need to be addressed within us. The solution to all of this, the solution to every problem we have, is the same. Sure, there are things that we can do that can help us in various aspects of our lives to conform, as it were, or to cultivate is the term I like to use, of various things to teach us, to guide us, to bring us there. And we call those things spiritual disciplines, which probably majority of Christians are either clueless about them or believe that that's not for them. That's from some strange desert father or mother mystic. But the reality is, these are things that we see Jesus and people within the New Testament, which we hold so dear to our hearts, engaging in. In fact, speaking of it in such a way where it was understood that these are things that you would be doing in your life, and to conceive of a life outside of that or without that, well, it just didn't happen. It just did not happen. But for whatever reason, those are practices that we have lost and have not engaged in. But my point is there are several things that we can do, but they all have something in common. They all have the same thing in common, to bring us deeper and deeper and deeper into a relationship with God. See, spiritual disciplines and the practice that we engage are like medicine. The goal is to come off of the medicine. The goal is to where you don't have to engage in certain practices anymore. The goal is not to have done the practice. It's to have gone through the process that the practice can bring you through. That being said, everything we do, all things that we do, are nothing more than guideposts to bring us into a deeper relationship with Jesus and a more loving and caring and satisfying and respectful relationship with one another. Everything we do is the opportunity to bring us deeper into that. You think about what you heard Jesse talk about this morning about his trip to Alaska. By the way, I agree with Jesse. Everything is not bigger in Texas. In fact, nothing is bigger in Texas. Everything is built smaller. We try to just compact everything in smaller places. The roads aren't even bigger. Nevertheless, you think about the things that he talked about and how that experience, if you didn't catch it, it drew him closer and deeper. You could hear it in his voice. The very fact that this is what he spoke about this morning. Everything we do is an invitation to draw deeper into a relationship with the one in whom we are supposed to have, or at least realize that we have our very existence in. Every breath you breathe, Yahweh, you speak his name. You breathe his breath. Your very existence finds its source in him, whether you believe in him or not. It is the reality in which we live, and everything we do, even being here this morning, it's a guidepost. This isn't an end all of itself. We put so much focus and energy in the things that really are supposed to, meant to take us deeper, which is, and think about it, in John 6, they put all this effort into going after Jesus because he gave them some food, and if I lived in those times and circumstances, I would have done the same thing as well. I mean, Jesus was like the first modern day fast food joint. I mean, seriously, think about it. He could just cough it up. There it was. The thing that they spent most of their time, most of their lives trying to put food on their table or to make sure they had food in dry seasons. Like everything they did, all their effort went towards that. And this man was able to just give them bread and fish. Like, and you know it tasted good. You know it did. And so they put all this effort into going after him. And Jesus says, you came to me not because of the signs that I did. Like, it's because of the food that you ate. And all this effort and energy, we do the same. But Jesus says, you got to go beyond that. We put so much effort and energy into things that one day we turn around and we say, and sometimes it's like within 30 minutes, we think, wow, that really wasn't that big of a deal. Why did I put all that energy and effort in it? In fact, it doesn't matter anymore. So much of our lives are like this. We put so much effort and energy into things, and we think that these are all, like as if they're the ultimate end all. But even being here in this place, and as important as that is, this is nothing more than guideposts to help bring us deeper into a relationship with God and a more loving and caring and respectful relationship with one another. And if it's not doing that, then something is amiss. Something is off. Something is wrong. Because we're created as spiritual beings, there are needs inside of us that we cannot meet on our own. And the efforts and energy that we put into things demonstrates to us the fact that there is the need, but our constant failure should remind us that we cannot fulfill these on our own. We try and we pursue, but emptiness and the void still remains. Now, as a Christian, that's essentially the last 3-4 weeks. As a Christian, okay, if we actually took seriously the command, which is the greatest command, if we actually took seriously what this is, we would experience the satisfaction that Jesus talks about in John chapter 4 and in John chapter 6 as a water springing up into eternal life. John 6, a bread where you'll never hunger again and never thirst again. John 7, out from you will flow rivers of living water and affect everyone around you. If we actually took seriously the greatest command, I'm telling you, we would experience the things that Jesus speaks about, the satisfaction and the fulfillment that is there. Think about this. We are all made in the image of God. God is love. And at the very core of who we're meant to be and are is love. That's it. There's no coincidence that the greatest command is to love God and to love others. Because therein you will find the fulfillment that Jesus says you'll have. There it is. And what we're talking about is intimacy. Today I want to talk a little bit about this intimacy with God that we've been all walking towards throughout this series. Taking seriously the greatest command. Intimacy. Intimacy with God. It goes beyond a set of prepositions or propositions that we can agree with. It goes beyond just the ideas or ideals that we experience, as it were, in our own minds and our own intellect. Intimacy with God is meant to be, and is, by the way, otherwise it is not intimacy, experiential. It's something that we experience. So what do we mean by intimacy? Well, let's think about this, because when we think of intimacy, well, I don't know what you're thinking about when you think about intimacy, but let me tell you what you should be thinking about when you think about intimacy. When we talk about intimacy, especially between other people or individuals, here's what it is. It's the idea of the blending of our hearts with another, so we can see into their lives and they can see into ours. We see into their hearts and we become to know them truly, and they come to know us truly. One of the best pictures we have of this is God creating man. The second best is husband and wife relationship, which, by the way, is meant to illustrate to us the relationship between God and his people. That's the intimacy we're talking about here. It's the mixing of our lives with another. We use terms like mingling of the souls and sharing of the hearts. I don't know who coined this phrase, and it sounds kind of well, I'm just going to say it because, well, I didn't come up with it. But I do think that it's a good way to remember what we're talking about when we talk about intimacy. She said it was this. Think about this. In to me, see. And I thought that as cheesy as that sounded to me in the moment, right now it doesn't sound as cheesy. Because that's what it is. Into me, see. And if I have intimacy with you, into me you can see. And into you, I can see. That's intimacy. And when we think about intimacy with God is all about us aligning our hearts, blending our hearts, mingling our hearts, mixing our lives with the heart of God. It takes God from the philosophical idea, it takes God from the peripheral idea to our present reality, wherein we truly live and move and have our very existence. Intimacy is something that's meant to be experiential. Intimacy, you know when you have it because you feel known. You know that you are known, and it's no less the case with God. Intimacy has the way of helping us realize that we have not been passed over or ignored, that we are known. And think about the language that is used throughout Scripture. John 10:3, Jesus says the shepherd calls his sheep by what? By name. He doesn't say, hey, you. He doesn't get his sons and daughters' names all mixed up. I got 4 and I get them all. Hey, you. He knows them by name. What is the image? What is the picture that is meant to present to us? Think of John 10:14. I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me. There's the picture of intimacy. Into me. See, Matthew 6, the Father knows what you need before you ask it. He knows your heart. Do you know his? That's why Jesus says, go in your closet and quit acting like a fool over here trying to get his attention like everybody else, trying to get the attention of whatever local god was on the dock. Do you know his heart? Align your heart with his by going in your closet and praying. That's the point that Jesus makes in Matthew 6. 2 Timothy 2:19, the Lord knows those who are his. You know what this tells me? Intimacy is meant to be pursued. I think too oftentimes we think it's just going to happen. We approach our relationship with God, understandably, the same way we approach our relationship with other people. How many guys just thought they had the total package and just thought intimacy was just going to fall in their lap, waiting for it to happen, but never talked to the person they should have talked to? You ever saw a couple together? I know I'm going to get this is not politically correct at all, but whenever I've been politically correct. You ever seen two people together and wondered, how in the world did that happen? But first of all, shame on you for being so judgmental. But second of all, he actually talked to her. We approach this relationship with God so oftentimes where we think it's just going to happen. We think it just falls in our lap. And we are not even prepared to listen. We can't even hear. We can't even understand what he's saying. And we think it's just going to happen. But intimacy is meant to be pursued. You see two people and you wonder, how did that happen? They have intimacy. They pursued and they see something beyond the standards by which we judge. Intimacy is meant to be pursued. That's why Paul says, 1 Corinthians 14:1, pursue love. By the way, and listen, if you want to argue with me, we can. And it's going to be a very short argument here, because all I'll do is I'll pull out the Greek, and I'll show you the word, and I'll show you that it is a noun. We get so fixated on when it comes to love. If you were not in class this morning, you missed a little piece that was a jewel. It was in there. It was somewhere in there. You could see it. It was all good. But when it comes to love, we focus so much on action. And we think we can create love in that way. But Paul already said, you can't do that. You can do all these things that you think that you define love by, but if you don't have love, it ain't love. So love is something I'm supposed to have? Paul says love is something you're supposed to be. It's actually a noun in 1 Corinthians 13. Yeah, I know other places where love is talked about and described and explained, it seems like it's a verb, it's an action, and I'm not denying that. Love will naturally flow, and when it does, you'll see it. But love is supposed to be something that you are. It's a state of being, which is why it's at the core of who we are. It's love. And that's why Paul says, listen, you have a desire to have all these gifts, and the gifts represent what? Things that you can do. And he says, pursue love. Yeah, but I can't I can't prophesy. I can't levitate. I can't speak in tongues. I can't heal somebody. Love? Because we think in terms of action and verbs only, but the actions will be there. But you got to start with the heart. And he says, listen, this is what you got to do. You got to pursue love. What do we mean by pursue? What is this talking about here? Here's the definition. To run after eagerly. To persecute something. You're going after it because you want it. You're going to pursue after something, and you're going to pursue after it in such a way that you make it run away from you. Kind of like that girl, maybe even your wife now, who finally gave up trying to run away from, right? You're going after something with so much intensity and eagerness that it's wanting to leave, it's wanting to run away. You're pursuing after it. That's the picture that Paul says. You're pursuing after love. How do I pursue after love? God is love. Pursue after God. Because he's the only one who can fulfill and create and transform and all these things that we've been talking about. He's the only one who can do that. We can pursue after all sorts of other things, and they'll give us some satisfaction and fulfillment for momentary time. But at the end of the day, they'll still leave us void. Paul says, pursue after God. You pursue after love. I love this. Hebrews 11:6. The Hebrew writer says, listen. You got to get it. Without faith, you can't please God. For whoever comes to God must believe that he is, that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek after him. We're not talking about being passive and expecting it just to happen. We're talking about pursuing something. You diligently seek after him. You know what the word diligently means? At least the Greek word here, it means to crave. It also means to investigate. It means to demand. It means to beg. You see the picture? You are pursuing God. You're begging, you're demanding, you're investigating, you're going after it. You want it. You desire it. You crave it. So what this tells me is that to experience this long, lasting, intimate love requires a passionate pursuit of not just anything, but of God. It's a passionate pursuit of the unseen, of the eternal, which Paul says in 2 Corinthians 4:18. It's the desire to be, as the psalmist puts in Psalm 1:3, to be the tree that is planted by the streams of water. Oh yeah, and by the way, if you remember last week or the week before last, anyways, one of those, God is the water. He's the water. So it's a desire to be the tree planted by, having the roots within God. Having the desire and going there. That's the picture here. Now, as Christians, we've come up with all sorts of ways to do all sorts of things. But I want you to think about this. If fulfillment could be had otherwise, not only would we have experienced it already, and I would be up here telling you what the next best thing is, not only will we have experienced it, it would have been stated. The greatest is this, fill in the blank. Fill it in. Now, that's the thing. We know the greatest command is to what? We know that. That'll give you an A on the test. But now let's be honest. The greatest in your life is what? What is it? Fill in the blank. What are you pursuing? What are you using to fill the void, the emptiness that you feel? We know that this is the greatest command. Matthew 22, 37 through 40, and we can all quote it. But I think it best if we read it. And maybe if you go home and write it down. And he said to him, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law. What? All the law and the prophets. So the first step is actually realizing that we will never be fully satisfied in another person, in another thing, in another pursuit. Don't put that burden on anyone else or on anything else that was not created to fulfill those expectations. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter if it's a spouse. It doesn't matter if my little sister's here. I'm going to embarrass her for a moment. I'm going to get her to come up here and no. My little sister's here. She's getting married on September 22nd. It's my little baby sister. And my brother-in-law, well, technically he's not my brother-in-law, but he's been my brother-in-law for years, so her fiance. They're getting married in 3 weeks? 3 weeks. I'm doing the ceremony. I don't know if I'm going to make it to that one. That one's going to be hard. It doesn't matter who that person is to you. It doesn't matter what that thing means to you. Don't put the expectation on that person, on that thing, to fulfill you in ways it was never intended to fulfill. It was never intended to do these things. Never. Never. John 10:10, Jesus says, I came. My brother-in-law's name is Taylor. Taylor did not come so that my little sister Kennedy could have life and have it abundantly. Mindy did not come so that Adam can have life and Kate did not come so that, well, I don't know, she kind of gave Nate's life. Kate did not come so that Nate could have life and have it abundantly. No achievement, no accomplishment that God has ever blessed you with has come your way and landed in your lap so that you can have life and that you can have it more abundantly. Jesus says, I came. Why? Because none of this other stuff's going to give it to you. I came that you might have life. The term life here, literally, zoe. It literally deals with the principle of life. Vigorously, energetically, full of life, fully alive, full of vitality. And while there are various things in our lives that are guideposts, right? Guideposts to bring us into a deeper relationship with Him, that's all they are. Within themselves alone, they are not meant to fulfill what Jesus came to fulfill. Nothing in this world is designed to do this, to fulfill in this way, except the intimacy with God. The second is this, accepting that this relationship is personal. It's personal. Now, I even hate using that terminology, by the way, because there are so many ideas and confusions in my mind about what we mean by this. We have to be careful with the language that we use. This is not a push towards individualism. Individualism, we live in an individualistic society, which means what? It's all about me. We're all independent and self-reliant. That's not the picture here. I've said it before and I'll say it again. You and Jesus ain't got your own thing going. He didn't come just for you. And if you're part of the body, you're part of something way bigger than you can even fathom or imagine. If you're a tree planted by the living streams of water, which is God, for us to try to narrow it down just between me and God, and my life doesn't affect yours and yours doesn't affect. So how are we supposed to understand this personal relationship? Because it's not independent. And it's not self-reliant. I came across this statement that I think really embodies what I'm trying to say here. I'm just going to read it to you. Some things with God are so personal, so intimate, that they cannot be described with words. They can only be felt with the heart. This is how true intimacy with God is. We feel that no one else can really understand the special bond that we share with him because it's altogether personal. It's a personal relationship. It's not us sitting back observing someone else who seems to have the thing that we want, but we say it's not for us, and so we try to live vicariously through them. It's for you. Personal. That being said, it can be very confusing and frustrating, right? Because you see these pictures in the New Testament of what these relationships look like, and you even see people in your own life, you're like, they got something that I don't have, I'm missing something, I'm the idiot here, I'm the dummy, I'm missing something, like I haven't figured something out. And we get frustrated, and we get down upon ourselves, and we think, oh, it's just failure after failure after failure after failure, and at the end of the day, we still feel a void, even though we're thinking we're doing all the things that we know what to do. We're doing the very best with what we've got, with what we know and what we understand in our journey. And it doesn't matter what anybody else says, your experience overrides that, because, well, you got your life and your thing, and that sounds good, but that's not me, and that's not my reality. Like, we go through all of these emotions and all these situations in our lives and in our minds, and we're just like, just something I'm missing here. Be patient. Developing intimate relationships take time. Unless you're like, Rico Suave like myself, my wife and I, it was done, right? Developing intimate relationships, it takes time. It takes time. It takes time. The problem is the difference between us developing relationships with one another and developing a relationship with God. See, when you try to have that intimate relationship with your significant other, so it doesn't matter. I keep saying you have intimate relationships with your parents, right? With your siblings, with people who are close to you in your life. That's why you call them close. They see into your heart. They know who you are. You've opened yourself up. They see within you. You see within them. The difference and the challenge is, though, in our relationship with one another, we all bring different stuff to the table. We all have our own baggage. We all have our own issues, right? But when it comes to us developing, and that hinders intimacy, it does. We're scared to open up. There's legitimate reasons for that. We're scared. But when it comes to a relationship with God, here's the thing. He doesn't bring his baggage. He ain't got none. You his baggage. We his baggage. He ain't got none. God doesn't have trust issues. See, but when it comes to developing that intimacy, the problem's not going to be with him, it's going to be with us. Because we bring to the table unbelief. We bring to the table a lack of trust. We got trust issues. We have issues with where we put what we're willing to entrust in the hands of him. Which is why, as we go along our journey, we recognize various aspects of us, we have not fully entrusted into him. And it's in that moment that we deal with that, right? So the hindrances in the intimacy have more to do with us than have to do with him. See, but he's pulling us deeper into that. And as he does, the more we recognize and the more we feel like failures, right? How is that? It's all about how we think. It's all about how we process the things that we're seeing. The problem is not going to be with God. It's going to be with us. We got trust issues. We got belief issues. We got issues being formed in a world away from God. There are times on our journey where we will still feel empty. We will still feel the void. Here's the thing you need to understand. There's no particular formula for how you deal with all of this. There's no particular formula to follow. There's no do this and everything's going to be better. No, it might make it worse. That's a reality. At least it might perceive in your mind to make it worse. It might feel worse to you. It's really easy to become disillusioned when we go through these dark nights of the soul, as some put it. These valleys where God seems to be distant. We feel empty. And if we're honest, we still feel that way at times, right? But we just don't talk about it. I know I'm not supposed to, right? I'm supposed to be able to be a saint and halo and levitate for you all. Yeah, there are times where yeah. It's really easy to become disillusioned when we feel that way. And if we're honest, we still feel that way. But we don't talk about it. And we should. And just saying, hey, be satisfied with Jesus is not going to help. Right? That's not going to help. Oh, it's a good thing to be reminded of, but it's not very helpful in the moment, is it? So as we grow deeper, continue to mature spiritually, here's what I want to leave you with today. There are times where you're going to feel like there is a void. Okay? But remember this. The deeper you go with God, the more mature we become. We do begin to see things differently, don't we? Even the way we define and look at the void that we feel changes. Let me present to you a few things here. You may come to realize this. Sometimes the void we feel is actually the love we have for God. It's the yearning for more, for what we think we seem or think we don't have. And it seems, right, or it can seem painful, which is why we would never attribute it to love. But really what we're feeling there is we're calling it a void, but the reality is it's just a deep yearning for more. It may actually be our love. Sometimes the void we feel can help us recognize what we're actually pursuing in life, what we're using to satisfy ourselves along the way. So sometimes it's good to feel that void. We also need to realize we're human, right? We are human. We're going to feel empty and unsatisfied at times. We're going to be restless. But it doesn't mean you've done anything wrong. And it doesn't mean that God has left you. That's just how you feel. And to be fully human is to feel that emptiness for what it is. And it's a reminder to us of what that place is for and who that is for. It takes us back to God. The reality is, we're living in a constant state of dying to self where Jesus is resurrecting within us. You think that's going to be pain-free? Do we feel like we're not going to go through processes? Necessarily, it's painful as we die to ourselves and as He rises, as it were, within us. And sometimes that's what we're feeling. We're going to have seasons like that. Remember that. And sometimes God uses the void to help us learn to be content in whatever situation we find ourselves in. Because remember, true satisfaction is found in contentment, and contentment is found where? In the Lord. Now you might be saying as I close this up, well, yeah, this is exactly where I'm at. What do I do? Let me give you some suggestions, okay? These are all just guideposts. I'll give you some suggestions. And if you're not there right now, maybe these will help you because you will be there. The first thing I would suggest to you is to spend time alone with God. Yeah, that's something we say. How many people actually do it? How many people actually do it? And I'm talking about being intentional about setting time apart to be just with you and God and no distractions whatsoever. 30 minutes, can you handle it? We have a hard time with silence. Silence makes us feel alone and empty. But here's the thing. When we're being intentional about being in the presence of God, it's not an emptying. That silence is a feeling. Because we're there in his presence, acknowledging it. So spend time alone with God. Spend time with those who are on the journey as well. This is not a time to isolate yourself. Talk about where you are. Bring it into the light. Be okay with saying, man, I feel like God ain't nowhere around, and everybody else would have no clue that this is how you feel. Don't be so concerned about how you perceive other people are going to see you. This is not the time to isolate yourself. Be around other people on the journey. Talk about where you are. Bring it into the light. And what this does is potentially protects you from pursuing other things that fill the void. I count that as a good thing. Work on being conscious of the presence of God throughout your daily moments. See, that's our problem. We want to set time aside, which is good, and you need to do that. But here's the point of why you set time aside, 15, 30 minutes, a whole day, whatever it is so that at some point you may not even have to do that, because you live literally moment to moment being conscious of the fact that you are in the reality of God, and the idea of coming to a place like this so you can be in the presence of God is foreign. Because while you came into the building, you were with him before you got out your vehicle. In fact, you woke up with him, right? In fact, you spent the day before with him, and the moment before with him, and the week before with him. That way, when you come into a place like this, it's more about the overflow and the outflow. Practicing the presence of God moment to moment, being conscious of the fact that that's where we are. He is with us, in him we live and move and have our very existence. 2 more things. Pray. Duh, right? I got to add that to the list. Yeah. You need to pray, Lord, help my unbelief. Because it's in those moments where you feel the dark night of the soul, when you feel the void, that's an opportunity to go deeper. It's a call to go deeper and deeper and deeper into him. And so that's scary, and you don't realize that. Maybe you don't know that. And so in those moments when you feel that, you say, Lord, help my unbelief. Unbelief, my lack of trust. Draw me deeper. Deeper. Final thing. I think this is the most important thing. So if you missed everything else I've said so far, go back and listen to it, because this will make more sense. Here's the thing, right here. I think this is the most important thing. It's also the hardest thing, or can be. When you feel the emptiness, don't run from it. Don't try to fill it. Don't try to get out of it. Be present in it. What? Yeah. James chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. James says, listen, and when you count it, you rejoice and try. And he uses language and he talks about things that are really foreign to others. Oh man, we can unpack this forever and ever and ever, and it's great. But he says, rejoice when you have trials. Because the trying of your faith will produce something. The trials, the things that you go through. And he uses specific examples and language there to explain some things that he's talking about. But the point is this. The things you go through, there are testing, there are trying, there are proving. There are things that you get out of it. Suffering can bring about great things. In the moment, you're like, We don't suffer well. We do everything we can to run from it, to get out of it, to end the suffering. And rightly so. It's understandable. I get it. I'm talking about even in the smallest mundane things. We don't like to deal with it. We don't like to feel it. We don't like to be there, right? We do everything we can to get out of it. Put all of our efforts and all of our energy to remove ourselves from the situation. And it doesn't matter what we're trying to do. We just want to get out of it. We don't want to feel it. We do not suffer well. Sometimes all the efforts that we put into getting out of the situation causes us to miss the thing that we were meant to learn. Now, I'm not here saying that every situation is something that you needed to endure. Well, actually, yeah, I would agree with that. But I'm not saying that there aren't things that we need to do and try and do, and I'm not saying I don't understand that there are things that we don't want to go through. I get all of that, but in every situation there's a reason, there's something to learn from it. I'm not saying that God causes everything to happen to you in your life either. I'm not saying any of that. All I'm saying is when you feel the void, don't run from it. Don't try to fill it with something else. Well, God ain't around, so I might as well use this. Don't try to fill it with something else. Don't try to run from the experience. Don't try to get out of the experience. Just be. Don't try to fix it. Don't try to fill it. And instead, be in it and say, all right, God, what are you trying to teach me? What are you trying to teach me? How am I supposed to grow from this? And you let the Holy Spirit in that moment do the work that it was intended to do. James says, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing this, the trying of your faith works patience, and let patience have its perfect work. In other words, let it go through. But instead of fighting against it, instead of trying to run up it and get out of the situation, no. Persevere. Be steadfast. You'll gain something from it. Don't try to run out of it so quick. There's something that you can learn from it and use it as an opportunity to do that. And in that moment, let God do the work that he's intended to do in that moment. And so you just be in that moment. Rest. Knowing that you're in good company. Right? Rest. Knowing that you're in good company. And just be in the reality that in him you live and you move and you have your very existence. I pray that that will be your reality. Our Father, we're grateful. We're thankful. I pray that you would draw us deeper. That you challenge us to look beyond what we see and what we experience. Set up those guideposts in our lives to draw us deeper into you. And I pray that we will experience an intimacy with you that goes beyond anything that we experience in this life, that will satisfy in such a way we will never want to look anywhere else. Draw us deeper. It's in Jesus we pray. Amen. Prayer team will be up here. If we can help you, assist you in any way, let us know. Next week, we're going to talk about the other half of the greatest command, loving one another. And that'll be the final 2 weeks of this series. If we can help you in any way, let us know. If not, pray that you have an amazing week of worship. We're dismissed. Thank you.